station. So you guys can probably tell from the theme of this museum that the thing that Talkeetna is really known for is being a place to come if you actually want to climb the mountain. So that's the reason why we have a ranger station here. We process all the climber permits. We deal with search and rescue on the mountain and basically do everything climbing related for Denali. So our climbing season actually is over for this year. It ended about a month ago, and our climbing season is pretty short. It's just from the end of April till about mid-July, because this is typically when we see the best weather for climbing. This is also when we got our mountaineering rangers who are actually stationed on the mountain. So obviously people like to go up when they're there, because it makes things a bit safer. Now, usually during the climbing season, we get about 1,200 climbers come through our station. So we are dealing with a lot of people. And about 90% of our climbers choose to do the West Buttress route, which is this route right here. And for you guys who can see in that corner, it's the green dotted line in front of you. So the reason why most people go for this route is because it's the fastest, easiest one up the mountain. So it's not all that easy and it's not all that fast. This is still going to take you 2 to 3 weeks to do, depending on conditions. So this is a time commitment. However, if you guys have been in the park already, you might have heard that this year is the 100th anniversary of the first successful climb. They did not take this route, however. They took a route on the opposite side of the mountain, right here across the Muldrow Glacier on the blue line. Now this route can take up to 2 months, depending on conditions, which is the reason why no one really does this one anymore. But this year we did have a group who were recreating the historic climb, so they did this route in June. However, they were basically the only ones who went on the Muldrow this year. So usually people will just stick to this route. Now, the West Buttress route is really not all that technically challenging to climb, but the reason why usually only half of our climbers reach the summit is because Denali is a very cold, very unpredictable mountain. Just out of curiosity, what is the coldest temperature that you guys have ever felt?
Minus 56.
Minus 50.
Can anyone beat minus 56? I think we might have a winner over here. You would do fine on Denali, but some of you guys might be a bit cold. The average temperature on our summit during the summer is about -20. Now this is the average, of course, so that means that when climbers are up here at high camp, they have to prepare for the chance of it being -50 degrees. Winds can get up to 100 miles per hour, so it's going to be a little bit colder feeling than -50. So definitely a lot of preparation is needed for this mountain. So I'm assuming that you guys are not actually interested in climbing this thing since you're here after the climbing season has ended. But let's just assume for a second that you guys are very experienced mountaineers and you've all decided that climbing Denali is going to be your next life challenge. So what are all you guys going to have to do before you get to the mountain? First thing, of course, is you got to train and you got to prepare. So what climbers will do is get together with some other climbers to form climbing teams. Usually people go up in groups of 5 to 6. So they'll get together with their friends and begin to train. We recommend that people get as much experience climbing above 14,000 feet as possible. And we also recommend that you get experience climbing on glaciers, because part of this route is across the Kahiltna Glacier here, and that definitely requires a different set of skills than climbing on a mountain. Now, once climbers have physically prepared, they need to have all the right gear. So I have some of it in front of me here to show you guys. First thing that everybody's got to have is a lot of rope, because everybody in the 5 to 6 person climbing group is attached to each other by the waist. Reason why this is important is because as you're making your way across the Kahiltna, there are going to be crevasses everywhere. And these are very deep cracks in the ice that are not always that visible, which is a bad thing because they can be as deep as a 40-story building. So that's why the rope is so important. If someone in your group happens to fall into a crevasse, hopefully that rope will save them and you'll be able to pull them out again. So going to pass out a picture of what these crevasses look like. The man in the picture is practicing rescuing himself out of a crevasse. He didn't actually fall in, so don't worry.
How far apart do they rope themselves?
Usually there's about 1 meter or 2 of rope in between each other. Yeah. So as people are making their way across the Kahiltna, trying to avoid all these crevasses, most people are skiing or snowshoeing this area because typically there's a couple feet of new fallen snow down there. So what people will bring is this spurring. It just attaches to the bottom of your skis. Kind of feels like velvet, so it just gives you some more traction when you're going up the slopes. So just let you guys get a feel of that. But once people get higher up on the mountain, it's just ice up here. So since ice tends to be slippery, that's when people switch over to the crampons. So these attach to the bottom of your boots. They're very spiky, so they just give you some better grip when you're on the ice. If you happen to start to fall down the slope, this is when your ice axe is going to come in handy. If someone starts to fall, what they're going to do is put one hand on top of the ice axe, push the blunt end into your shoulder, and then you try to fall directly on top of the axe. Hopefully then your body weight will push this serrated edge into the snow, and you'll be able to catch on to something to break your fall. You have to do this very quickly though, because usually you only have a couple seconds to save yourself.
Don't get it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So, once people get up here past high camp, between high camp and the peak, there's about 800 feet of fixed line. So climbers will bring carabiners in order to strap themselves in, and it just makes the climb a little bit easier once you're in the higher elevations. However, this year, we had an extremely warm summer, which you can't tell right now, but during June, it was very, very hot. One day, it was the highest recorded temperature in Talkeetna ever, got up to 97 degrees. So that was very unusual. It was really hot down here, but it was also very hot on the mountain. So as a result, this season, people were saying that they could hear running water under the ice around the fixed lines. So people were kind of avoiding them this year, but typically most people will strap themselves in. So here's a picture of what these fixed lines look like that I was just talking about. Now when people are climbing Denali, usually they have at least 100 pounds of gear with them. Now this is a lot of stuff, and obviously they don't want to carry that much weight up the entire mountain if they don't have to. So system that's worked out is as they're making their way up, they store things that they're going to need for their descent as they go, just to unload some weight. And in order to find your stuff again, you bring about 30 of these wands. So on here has got the team leader, permit number, and return date, so you can figure out whose stuff is whose. But we also have to tell climbers, you need to bury your stuff at least 3 feet in the snow. Reason for this is because we have a little animal up there that's discovered that these wands tell them where to find snacks. This animal can also imitate the sounds of 70 other different animals, and some researchers think that they're smarter than chimpanzees. Does anyone have an idea of what they are?
Humans.
Nope, nope. Any other guesses? What'd you say?
Magpie is a bird.
Close. It's raven, actually.
Oh my.
So you might have seen ravens flying around Talkeetna.
Yes, we have.
They're also up on the mountain, and there's nothing else to eat up there except for your food. So they will try very hard to get at it, so it's important to bury your stuff deep enough. So I can imagine it'd be very disappointing to come down the mountain and discover you don't have any more food.
Never mind.
Now the last thing that I got here that climbers bring is the clean mountain can. For the 2 to 3 weeks that they're doing this route, this is their bathroom. Everything's pack in, pack out on the mountain because we want to keep it as clean as possible. So how this works is you take your clean mountain can up, and there are crevasses marked along the route for clean mountain can contents. So once yours is filled, just take out the biodegradable bag, throw it in a crevasse, and then once you finish your climb, you return the can to the ranger station and we take care of it.
So you throw it down the crevasse?
Yeah.
Really?
The exception to this is when you're up at high camp because it's so cold that it won't just stay there forever. So you do have to take your stuff down. Also, you're not allowed to throw it in the crevasse when you're at base camp because there are just so many people there, it'd be ridiculous. So you have to fly that stuff out with you to Talkeetna. So, that's That's how that system works. Usually I don't go into that much detail.
So that's not a beer cooler. That's not a beer cooler.
Not a beer cooler.
No, definitely not. Yeah, someone asked me if that was for food one time. I was like, no.
How many rescues do you have to do a year with those 1,200 climbers?
Sorry, what was the question?
How many rescues per year would you have to do with 1,200 climbers?
Well, this year it was really low since we had that great weather. It was only 5 rescues, but usually it's around 15. So we do use our search and rescue helicopter pretty frequently.
How much does it cost to rescue a person?
I'm not sure of total cost. I know that our pilot Andy told me one time that having the helicopter fly for an hour costs about $1,000. And that's just, doing routine drop-offs. I don't know if it's more if you have to, rescue somebody.
Does a rescue mean saving 1 or 2 people or bring the whole 5 or 6 party down?
We just rescue the one person who's not doing well.
That's what it's about.
So we're not going to take everybody.
No,
up.
okay.
Nobody gets a free ride. We want you to come down on your own unless you are really doing poorly up there.
Do you have to pay to do this? Is there
To
a
climb the
cheap
mountain?
amount?
Annual fee.
Yeah. So permit fee is $350 to do this mountain, which is pretty cheap compared to other summits.
Per person.
Per person, yeah. It's a bit cheaper if you're, I want to say 24, 25 or younger. It's at $200 then.
Have you gone up the mountain yourself?
I haven't had a chance to yet because this is my first season at this park. Before I was working at some state beaches in Southern California. So this is different, but hopefully within a couple of years I'll be experienced enough to do this. Definitely need to work my way up to it. Most people who do this route do it when they're in their mid to late 30s, because that's usually how much time it takes to get enough money to do this and enough experience. And I'm only 22, so I got plenty of time to work my way up there.
Takes none to talk about it, though. Huh? I'm not being disrespectful, but it takes none to talk about it.
Well,
Do you have to pay for your own rescue?
all search and rescue on federal public land is paid for by tax dollars. So this includes, climbing Denali, but it also includes, if your 5-year-old wanders away from a campground in Yosemite, just all of that is covered by tax dollars. So, once climbers are physically prepared and they got all the right gear, next thing they have to do is register 2 months in advance before they do their climb with the Talkeetna Ranger Station. They have to pay that permit fee of $350, and they have to submit a resume of their climbing experience so we can see what routes they've done before and see if they're actually prepared to do this type of mountain. Now, once climbers actually arrive in Alaska, they have to attend a 2-hour orientation with the Talkeetna Ranger Station. So this is when they get the Clean Mountain Can, they get the stickers for the wands, but it's also when we show them pictures of the entire route, talk about any new conditions that we've seen up there, and we have them spread out all of their gear so we can see what they're planning on bringing and making sure that everything is in good enough condition. Of course, last thing we ask during the orientation is what color is your tent and what time do you think you'll be back? Because if people do not come back to the Talkeetna Ranger Station at a time that we think they should be off the mountain, that might mean we need to send out the search and rescue helicopter to go find them. And like I said before, we do have to do that every single season, unfortunately. But what I'm going to do with you guys now is play a little game where we're going to pretend like you guys are 2 groups of climbers who are making your way up Denali. So let's put you guys about here, and we'll have team number 1 and team number 2. Now, like real climbers, first thing you got to do is fly from Talkeetna into base camp. So what climbers will do is they'll hire planes over the Talkeetna airstrip to fly them directly onto the Kahiltna Glacier at 7,000 feet, and then they begin their climb there. So, how this game is going to work is I'm going to pass out one of these bags. Just pick one card out of the bag and read it out loud, and you'll see what happens to your team. So, team number 1 is now going to try to fly into base camp, so let's see what happens there.
You don't get to look and choose, huh?
No. Can't look first.
This is the element of surprise.
Yeah, just like the real
Just
clock.
pick one of them?
Yeah, just pull out one.
Okay. Well, I kind of, why don't you do it? You didn't read them.
Here you go. Talkeetna to base camp. You make it to 6,000 feet on the Kafutna Glacier, but fog forces the pilot to turn the plane around and fly back to Talkeetna. After another 2 days, you finally make it to base camp.
All right, so we call it the Talkeetna Hang. People are stuck here for a few days, just waiting for the weather to clear up before they start their climb. Not unusual at all. So let's see if team number 2 has to do the hang as well.
Oh, that's, I'll pull from here.
Yeah.
Your air taxi is ready, the weather is clear, and you make it safely to base camp.
All right. So team number 2 did not have to do the hang, and all you guys have made it to base camp. So I'm just gonna pass out 2 pictures of what it actually looks like up there. So when climbers fly in, they check in with our base camp manager, so we know that their group has arrived on the mountain. And then from there, they start to make their way across the Kahiltna. So you guys are gonna be heading up to Skeet Hill now. You can tell that it's really not that big of an elevation gain because you're just going across the glacier. But you're definitely gonna have to deal with those crevasses that I was talking about before. So let's see how team number 1 does.
You choose to haul your gear up in the heat of the day. The heat and your sudden exposure to high elevation leave you dehydrated and dizzy, and you faint by your tent.
Sounds good for us.
Sounds good.
Alright. So team number 1 is definitely gonna need some time to recover from that.
Yeah.
But the reason why they fainted is because they were trying to make their way across the Kahiltna right in the middle of the day. Now we tell climbers it makes a lot more sense to climb the lower elevations in late afternoon or actually during night. Reason for this is because when you're on the Kahiltna, you're basically in a valley of white. Everything's covered in snow, so the sun is reflecting off every surface, and it's very easy to get dehydrated and very easy to get sunburned, as team number 1 has now discovered. But hopefully team number 2 does a bit better as they make their way across Kahiltna.
Oh, boy.
Is there no crevasse danger at night?
Right. Well, it's not actually dark at
Oh.
nighttime during the summer.
Gotcha, okay.
Your skin is red with embarrassment and sunburn.
All right, so you guys did the same thing.
Uh-oh.
Did we find?
But you didn't faint. It just says I traveled during the day.
So you guys did faint, but you're still sunburned.
Sunburn.
All right. So, just gonna pass out a picture of what climbers look like when they're making their way across the Kahiltna. Like I said before, they have about 100 pounds of gear with them. So most climbers will start out with a little plastic sled where they'll load up about 60 pounds and then put 40 pounds on their back. So it just distributes the weight a little bit. You can also tell that most of the climbers have their entire bodies covered to prevent from that sunburn. And they're also wearing snow goggles to prevent from sun blindness. So you guys are going to be making your way up to Motorcycle Hill now, gaining a bit of elevation. So let me get somebody from team number 1 to read this.
It's time for a change of luck.
Get it right now.
Okay. You camp a safe distance from an ice fall. A tremor during the night doesn't wake you, but the thundering crash of ice does. You're scared silly by the sound, but otherwise you are okay. Hey, we made it. Finally.
Alright, so earthquakes are very common in this area. Usually we get about 3,000 earthquakes a year within the park boundaries. Most of those are really small, like 0.5, so you can't even feel them, but it's still a very active area. So climbers have to be aware that there is the potential danger of a rock fall or an avalanche caused by an earthquake, which team number 1 has now experienced.
But they survived.
But they survived.
We lived
They
it.
managed to keep going. So let's see how team number 2 does.
Okay, you haul some of your supplies up to Motorcycle Hill and then return to Ski Hill to camp.